internal controller plugins contained within FL Studio represent a powerful palette of tools that you can use to manipulate any automatable parameter. The implementation is such that you can take the level of control as deeply as you wish to go. The internal controller plugins are made up of automation clips, the dashboard, the formula controller, keyboard controller, peak controller, envelope controller, and the XY controller. All of them work on the same basic principle. Values between 0 and 100% are output, and these are linked to an automatable parameter by right-clicking the parameter, choosing Link to Controller, selecting the controller channel in the internal controller drop-down, and then clicking Accept. A single controller channel can be used to control multiple parameters by deactivating the Remove Conflicts button. The XY controller allows you to control two parameters at the same time using your mouse or a joystick if you have one. Here I have assigned the X output to the cutoff frequency and the Y output to the resonance of a SimSynth generator. The plugin's interface allows you to set the minimum and maximum values output by both the X and Y controllers. The tension affects the output such that when pushed up, the maximum values are reached faster, and vice versa when pushed down. The speed knob controls how quickly value changes are sent as you move the control. Rightmost is fast and responsive, and leftmost is sluggish. Acceleration affects whether the value accelerates to the point where the crosshairs are. This can be best demonstrated at a slower speed. At certain settings, you will see the output value spiral around the crosshairs, giving a more organic sounding change in the parameters. If you have a joystick, enable the joystick controller button and select the joystick from the drop-down. The XY buttons below allow you to choose the joystick signal that they each respond to. The speed knob affects how quickly the XY controller reacts to the joystick input. The Fruity keyboard controller allows you to create elaborate gating effects as well as giving you a means to do accurate pitch shifts by using MIDI note and velocity information triggered from the piano roll or from an external MIDI keyboard. Controller values between 0 and 100% are spread across the range defined in the keyboard view, which by default is between the notes C4 and B5. Triggering a note within this range will cause the value set for that note to be output. The output value can be set by left-clicking a key and then moving the value knob. Here I have penciled in some notes into the keyboard controller channel's piano roll and have assigned the note outputs of the controller to the cutoff frequency of the SimSynth patch. I can then assign the velocity output to the high-pass frequency wheel, giving the part rhythmic emphasis as well as sonic variation. The release button outputs a value whenever a MIDI note finishes, so the parameter will always return to this value. The smooth knob defines whether the value change will be immediate or if it slides from the old to the new. To use the keyboard controller to change the pitch of a generated channel, select the preset to pitch knob. Assign the note output to the pitch knob on the generator's channel settings. Now the pitch of all notes in the generator's playlist will transpose according to notes on the keyboard controller channel's piano roll. The peak controller outputs an envelope signal that follows the audio signal coming through the track mixer channel upon which it is placed. This can be used to create an auto wire effect if you then assign the cutoff frequency of a filter to the peak controller's output. Here I have a cheesy funk bass riff triggering the Boo Bass generator. I will place the Fruity peak controller on its track mixer channel and deselect the mute button so the Boo Bass output is passed through. Then I will place a Fruity filter effect in the next slot and assign the cutoff to the peak output. A wire is usually built around a bandpass filter, so I'll turn down the low pass and high pass output and turn up the resonance. By adjusting the bass value as well as the decay of the peak controller, I can get a pretty good sounding auto wire effect. If you hear the output breaking up, then it needs to be smoothed. Try first activating the ramp switch on the peak controller. If that doesn't work, then right-click the automated parameter and activate the smooth knob. The further to the right the knob is turned, the slower the parameter will respond to the automation. You'll need to press accept to hear the effect of smoothing. The peak controller also has an LFO built in that you can use to automate other parameters separate to the peak signal. The peak controller effect is also useful for affecting a musical part with the rhythmic output of another part. For example, a pad sound's volume is gated by the rhythm of a drum part. Here I have the volume of the SimSynth being affected by the peak controller, while the cutoff is affected by the LFO on the peak, and the resonance is being affected by the LFO. I've also applied the peak controller to a filter placed on the drum loop channel. Once you start to assign multiple parameters to a single controller stream, you might find yourself wanting the various parameters to respond differently to the controller signals. This is where the mapping formula section on the remote control settings panel comes into play. The thought of doing any maths in FL Studio might seem daunting, but initially you don't even need to worry about that because there are some useful presets to start you off, and they will give you some idea about the syntax of the formulas should you wish to get into it. Getting a bit of a handle on mapping formulas will hold you in good stead when you decide to get into the Fruity Formula controller. To demonstrate, I have a Fruity keyboard controller velocity output linked to the cutoff of a SimSynth patch. The velocity output is a rising ramp from low to high. The default map is simply input, which is the value sent by the controller. The first map preset is called inverted, and the formula is 1 minus the input. The first velocity value is 3%, so if you think of the percentage being the decimal 0.03, the map will output the value of 1 minus 0.03, or 0.97. The next velocity value is 0.14, so the output will be 0.86. So with this simple formula, we have inverted the value's output from the velocity, so a rising ramp has become a descending ramp. The next preset is log scale. This converts the velocity ramp to a logarithmic curve, as opposed to a straight linear curve. The formula command to create log curves is tension, which is exactly the same tension command that appears elsewhere in FL Studio. Try changing the value to higher and lower amounts, including negative values, to vary the tension on the curve. Press Enter to recompile the formula and accept to hear the changes. Experiment with the remaining presets, and with each one try to understand the maths that is going on to create the effect. This will help a lot towards solidifying your understanding of the way controller values work within FL Studio. There is a full list of mapping formula commands in the FL Studio help file. Use the search terms mapping formula to find them. The Fruity Formula controller takes the mapping formulas of the remote settings dialog to a whole different level. Up to 3 variable values, A, B and C, can be utilized within the formula used to output controller information. If you link the 3 value knobs to external MIDI controls, then you can introduce loads of interactivity and human randomness into the equation as well. The formulas in the presets for the formula controller are a good deal more complicated than those in the mapping formulas, but most presets come with an info page with a brief description of what the preset does, as well as the effect values A, B and C have. There is also a meter so you can see the shape of the values being output over time. Look up the online help for the formula controller to see a full list of functions, objects and syntax available to the plugin. One of the most immediate applications for the Fruity Formula controller are sophisticated LFOs. Try substituting different functions, example cos for sine, to see the different effect this has on the output graph. One interesting preset that you might find useful for live performance is the mouse position preset, which generates a controller value based on the current Y position of the mouse. If you set up another formula controller for the X mouse position, you'll have a giant XY controller that is always active whenever you move the mouse. Okay, that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Hopefully you have gained some insight into the incredible power that exists within the framework of internal controller plugins within FL Studio, and are perhaps inspired to explore more deeply the ideas touched upon here.